My first guest this week is Jaco Booyens. He is a director and filmmaker, president of After Eaten Pictures, and the founder of Share Together, a nonprofit focusing on ending trafficking. And he is an authority on human and sex trafficking. And I brought him on to give us a better understanding about trafficking, how prevalent it is, and what needs to be done to root it out. Here's the first segment of our interview. Jaco, welcome to the show.
Charles, thank you. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
This is such an important topic, and outside of you and a few other strong people, it is simply not talked about enough. So I was excited to have you on so you can educate me and others a little bit more about it. We are talking obviously about human trafficking, and I guess I want to start by finding out what led you to get so involved in fighting trafficking.
You know, like most things in life, I think if there's a personal connection, then you really, it's like there's just another driving force. I think the longevity of the fight, it's extended because people are in it. And so for us, a family member, my sister, was trafficked for an extended period of time. And that's really her story to tell. It's an amazing story that she tells so well in a book she has called Keeping Secrets. My sister's name is Ilonka, and so for us at the time, nobody was talking about human trafficking. This is in mid-90s. And so fast forward that situation, and by God's grace, she's rescued and restored, and an amazing fighter also in this fight, an amazing woman, a mom, a wife, which is a very, very unique story in its own right, and counter to the norm. The success rate of really restoring a life, I'd say, to where it wasn't even better, is under 2%. So that being said, arriving in the U.S. as an immigrant, you wouldn't think that you would see it here, but then we did. And we started seeing trafficking as we are learning through the eyes of a sister of what happened. And that was a bit of an intense period, because oldest brother, you feel responsible. How did this happen on my watch? There wasn't a father figure in the home, which is a big talking point for this issue. Predators really highlight that in particular, or if they can manipulate the father figure, or the father figure is the predator. And the father figure could be an actual father or a coach or someone of influence and trust, as we saw with the Boy Scouts leaders, etc. If there's trust in that role of a father, mentor, that role has massive, massive authority and ability to manipulate the young life. And so when we arrived to the U.S., we saw it, and then it was just, we had to turn the lights on the fight, right? And we had to get involved. And it took a while to really get going, just to learn the industry first. And then finally, we were able to say, okay, let's go. And so it's been a long journey in this fight. It's afforded us to fight the fight in 53 countries around the world. Our team in 2012, 2014 decided that we needed to focus on the 50 states of the United States. That at that time, hardly anybody was really focusing. There were some organizations doing some amazing work on the street, as we call it, or the track. But we needed to focus and bring a different perspective to this fight in the U.S. because it was out of sight, out of mind. And really, Charles, still today, for a lot of Americans, they think it's a third world country issue. It's Haiti, Cambodia, the Philippines, which of course is true. It's there. But we are the number one nation on earth commercializing sex with children. No question.
You talk about your sister, and obviously she has to tell her own story. I actually had your sister on the show, but, I want to talk about your end of it. Like you say, you touched on it a bit as big brother, how that affects, because people think about, we can't even wrap our mind around what that trauma must be like for someone who's been trafficked. But rarely do people think about the other victims of that, the family members. So can you talk a little bit more about how you and your mom and the people in your circle were affected by what happened to your sister?
Out of respect to my sister, I never initiate this topic ever. Or if I do, I really try not to make it ever about me, because it's not about me.
Right.
But out of the thousands of interviews I've done, Charles, I want to just commend you. You're one of the very few people that's ever asked this question. And it's an unasked question. And so there's a whole community in the abuse system that never gets a voice to say how it affected them. The wife of the husband who committed suicide and left the family behind, or the children who's speaking into what the divorce did to them, right? And that's what you're talking about. And I'd love to have that conversation, because we are, and we were, and people need to know this, a very, very tight family. I'm talking about, we drive to school together. Every event we go, every concert my sister played, she was a recording artist, we are there. Two brothers, mom, my mom's engaged. We were tight. This is not what people think, that, oh, she was the goth child that was drifting, that had no relationship with her mother. Not at all. We eat 3 meals a day together, Bible study together at night. In church, I mean, we are tight. And still, a predator found his way into the trust circle of the family, found his way into, obviously through the music industry with Ilonka. So when that finally happened, right, and it happened in phases, when Ilonka went through her trafficking, and it's a 6-year period, in the moment, there's a set of pain and a set of questions and a set of self-judgment. And I'm 6 years older than my siblings, so I really was the father figure. And Ilonka would tell you at times they looked at me as a dad, not a brother. And so that in itself puts a set of pressure, on you. Well, there's absolute, what did I do wrong to drive a wedge? I didn't know. And so you start asking those questions. And then you fast forward to Ilonka being rescued, and then you learn what men had done to her. And I've actually never really in an interview had this conversation. This is an exclusive, actually. That moment, and I'll never forget it for the rest of my life, we're sitting in a living room in Nashville, Tennessee, after we immigrated to the U.S. It's myself, my brother, my mom, another friend, and Ilonka, and she is recollecting these events, what men had done in detailed fashion, right? There's no words. Your world changes forever. I'm sitting in that chair, and it was like the earth was swallowing me, because my immediate thought was, this happened on my watch. I failed. I failed as a big brother. I failed as I never saw myself as a father figure. They saw me as that when we had to do that therapy later on, and we had to get through that situation about resetting. No, I'm a brother, and I'm not a father, because if you see me as your father, I will always disappoint you, because I'm not. And I don't approach you that way. And so there's so much psychosis and psychological elements and emotional elements over decades, right, that's built up. And this is why it's so important that people deal with trauma when it happened, because now you have to retroactively go back and retrace in its emotions and its abandonment. And of course, I had to deal with abandonment from our father. I didn't have a dad either, right? And no, I wasn't trafficked. And Ilonka ended up being trafficked. And not having a father present was a big part of why the predators felt comfortable enough to press into, to traffic Ilonka. Had we had a father present, I absolutely don't think there's a chance she gets trafficked. Not at all. At least if it was a loving father. So identifying, then I replay my mind. Okay, so they identified me as the father figure. They knew I couldn't stay. I couldn't, because I had activities. I go to school. I play sports. So there's these gaps. There's these holes, right? But absolutely, as she's telling us what happened to her in that moment, it was immediate self-judgment, massive, huge, emotional roller coaster of, this is my fault. 100%, this was my fault. I didn't even look at my brother at the time and project it onto him and say, hey, where were you? Where were you in this fight? Now, later on, speaking to him, he had many of the same feelings, because they're the same age. They're 13 months apart. They had the same friends. I never even shared a school with my siblings. We didn't have the same friends at all. 6-year gap. I mean, there's no, we lived together, but in social circles, we lived past one another. And so the judgment and the self-judgment, it was insane. And then came the hatred, and I had to deal with hate in my heart, because I started hating. I wanted to go back to South Africa. You feel like I want to go end people. You want to go end the lives that hurt your sister, right? And that's in direct contrast to my belief system, my faith. God is love, forgiveness, and so. I don't know that you can put it in words. It was, and this is not about me, but it was, and this is not a minute. You're talking about years, because now every time you're watching Ilonka at that time going through rehab, therapy, counseling, and as she recollects, in her story to you, the thoughts in her own mind of, I shouldn't I shouldn't be alive. I should live, not wanting to live. Every time you see one of those things, of course, you got huge heart and compassion for your sister, but there was always that, part of this happened because of me.
Coming up, more with Jaco Booyens, founder of Share Together. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
In Denver, and I just can't remember her name.
Now, more of The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer, with your host, Charles Love.
Welcome back. We are talking with Jaco Booyens, president of After Eden Pictures and founder of Share Together. In the last segment, he was talking about the horrific ordeal his sister went through and how it affected him and his family directly. And here we get into some difficult truths about trafficking. And I ask him to talk about who the real victims are. Are they children from third world countries, or is this an American problem? As we start to get into what you found in educating us, I think that there's a misconception about the type of people who are trafficked. And Ilonka's story tells a different thing because of how close-knit your family was. Now, granted, there wasn't a father there, so that changes the dynamic. But I think one of the reasons it's not talked about as much as it should be is because people think, well, that's a third world country issue, or it's just kids on Skid Row. It's runaways, and it's people who are homeless and poor, and it's the people that society has kind of cast aside. Now, it may be more prevalent there, but it happens in affluent areas and poor, every racial demographic, every income level. So can you talk about the groups that suffer from this and how it really is everyone?
Yeah. And so through that healing process and then the learning process, they say you invest 10,000 hours in the craft, you probably become an expert or a pro. Well, brother, this is decades, right? So we're on the front lines every day, and we learn, as God ordained it, we have a very unique approach to this fight. I want to know why, the root, where does it stem from? Who allows it to happen? Where's the system broken? How did the predators profile? So we've spent years in really getting into the mind of how this works and how does society support it without knowing it's supporting it. Who's actually for the trafficking of children? Because there's a large groups that are for it. And here's the net result. The net is this. Sexual immorality, sex trafficking, sexual abuse, the rape of children does not ask what gender, race, socioeconomic class you are. It does not care. Now, yes, could you say, hey, kids on Skid Row, kids on the street, are they more vulnerable, more susceptible? Sure. Does that mean that's who's being trafficked? No, here's the fact. The fastest rising form of trafficking in the United States is what's called familial trafficking, which means it is a family member or a trusted individual in the circle of the family, aka a coach, a school principal, a Boy Scout leader, etc. That's the fastest rising form of trafficking, and that is in suburban America. We're talking about functioning children who are functionally dysfunctional. They go to school, but they are forced to be sex slaves while at home. And this is where America, you hear the tires come to a halt and they go, no way. As long as you say no way, you're the reason it's here. You know that under 1% of trafficking today in the U.S. is kidnapping. Under 1%. And everybody goes, oh, it's like the movie Taken. You got to be a foreign exchange student. You go where your parents didn't say you should go, and the wrong boy, the wrong bar. And well, of course, you're going to get yourself in trouble if you do those things. But that's not human trafficking in the United States. And we can't stand it when people think, well, I don't see a whole bunch of children being kidnapped in my neighborhood. We would have known. No, they're not being kidnapped. They're sex slaves while living at home. They are in the community. They go to school. They play extracurriculars. And then they walk, 300 kids per night on the streets of Dallas, 3 o'clock in the morning. These aren't street kids. You don't see them from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. on the streets. No, they are in society, hidden in plain sight, functioning. And that should scare the life out of Americans, because it means that this evil is so cunning, it's so real, that it has crept into everyday life. And now all of a sudden, you can hardly go to any hotel in this country, and there's not elements of trafficking inside that hotel. All the major chains, all of them. And Jaco, you're disparaging. No, the predators understand that there is a way to manipulate a young person's mind, literally control them, and this is not conspiracy, this is a fact, abuse them, use sex as a weapon, threats, precondition their mind, play to their greatest desires, their greatest fears, play to their insecurities, give them love where they've identified they don't have love, give them purpose. You can walk that human being down Main Street in plain sight. And that is the scariest part, Charles, about where we've gotten to. The red light district mentality, out of the window, okay? Now with social media and the direct connect between a predator and a victim, right, where you used to have a pimp. You had to earn your right in with a pimp on the street. You had to buy some drugs from him, have some favor for him to sell you, quote unquote, one of his girls. You had to put your life at risk because the cops knew that area. You had to it was risky. Today, it's a cell phone. Guys are sitting in boardroom meetings, ordering children for sex on their phone while amongst their peers. So think about any other crime. What other crime in the world is there that you can do in the middle of a boardroom? Can you sell a pound of cocaine in the middle of a Fortune 500? No, you can't. Can you do an illegal drug trade, an arms trade? No, but you can order a child. That is how cavalier it's become. Now that makes our fight so much bigger because now the buyer has direct talk and connection with the 13-year-old victim. Don't even need a pimp in the middle. You've got social media. So social media has become a pimp factory, for that matter, if you want to call it that. It's a platform where there's communication going back and forth. Do you know that over 65% of the Gen Zers in this country at the moment self-confess that they've sent naked pictures of themselves? These are 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old girls. 65%. You think that picture just goes to Johnny, who's your boyfriend? That thing is out there. It gets flagged. You can hardly have a conversation with your best friend about going on a ski trip, and the next minute you open Facebook and there's an advertisement for a ski trip on your app. They're listening. Everything is there, right? And so the predator is a master profiler. It's a master at understanding and identifying hurt. Hurt people hurt people. Hurt people know how to spot hurt. Well, a predator most likely is also someone that was sexually abused. They understand abuse. So they see somebody who's either been abused, right? Who's been neglected, who's got a heart hurt, who doesn't have a father figure, because our kids today vomit online. They share everything online. So you could build a case, a dossier on a child online. If you pay attention, if you're a skilled predator, that child has no chance, zero.
Wow. I think I want to finally put this, it's not our problem things to bed. Can you give them some numbers on American children that are falling victim to trafficking?
Yeah, let's have two conversations. We're going to have a border conversation because everybody wants to have it, and we will. But let's forget about the border now. We're talking about an American-born child with an American birth certificate, born in the 50 states of the United States. Let's focus on that group of people. The average age of a child trafficked in America today is 12. Well, is that just a number someone thumb-sucked and picked a number? No, it's because every single young woman in our country between the age of 12 and 50 goes through puberty. Every single one of those women that's listening to your podcast today, to your radio show today, every single one of those women will say the minute that happened, the minute they woke up, they were confused. They didn't know their body. They felt feelings they'd never felt before. Hormones kicked in. They couldn't speak to their father. They were embarrassed. They were shamed. Someone gave them a book to read and said, here's the book on sex. No one sat them down and had a real conversation about the dangers out there. They started noticing boys at that age. They notice boys, and they notice boys their age are idiots, so they're like older boys. Every girl. Think about all the things I'm saying. Now you sprinkle a little social media in there. You sprinkle the hookup culture in there. You tell them that love is a feeling, right? All of a sudden, love is just a feeling and love is not sacrificial. All of a sudden, you sprinkle in the massive, divorce rate in the country, the fatherlessness in our Black community. You sprinkle all those things in. And now this kid, who's a girl, 95% of the traffic victims are girls, American-born, is a sitting duck for a predator to go, there you are. And he knows exactly what she needs in that moment. Today, she played a soccer match. I see her dad wasn't there. She needs love. She needs affirmation. She needs to be recognized, witnessed. Tell her her eyes are pretty. These guys will test the girls, and they win their hearts over. Because in that time frame, 12 to 15, they are vulnerable. Now, how many of those are there in the United States? We have 75,000 children trafficked per day in the state of Texas alone. 75,000 children trafficked. Now, a child doesn't get trafficked and raped once. On average, 5 to 10 times per day. They get sold by family members. They do get moved. Some do get kidnapped. They get moved from city to city, state to state. Some stay right at home. Those are the most dangerous. 75,000. We have over 500,000 in the crosshairs of being trafficked every day, perpetually that group of people in the U.S., and 1% of the crime is reported. The numbers are staggering.
Coming up, more with Jaco Booyens, founder of Share Together. You are listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
Nothing else matters.
Now, more of The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer, with your host, Charles Love.
Welcome back. I am continuing my conversation with Jaco Booyens. He is the president of After Eden Pictures and the founder of Share Together, a nonprofit organization fighting against the global crisis of sex trafficking. Here, he highlights the foster care system, the cartel's involvement, and how terrible open border policies exacerbate the problem.
You want to talk epidemic in our country and what's really going on? This is the silent, evil in our country that's going on. Then on top of it, today, you have a border issue where people come in and children are being trafficked, but also children being taken out of the United States, right? And again, these are all race, socioeconomic class, status. It's prevalent wherever. Of course, a child that's a foster child, that's a runaway, is more vulnerable, right? For sure, more vulnerable and more susceptible to being trafficked because that child really has nobody. But then we need to talk about our foster care system. Our foster care system in this country is as broken as any other system. It's completely infiltrated with pedophiles. We have the state handing children to known pedophiles. The average foster child in America today will move homes 10.4 times every 24 months. So you're telling that girl who's already got a heart hurt, who doesn't have a father, who can't talk to anybody, who's been sexually exploited, she's going to have 10 dads in the next 2 years? And she should somehow trust men, and somehow she should know right from wrong, and somehow she should have a healthy understanding of what sexuality is and sex. And come on, what are we talking about? Now you want to say on the border, we're going to bring children from other countries, and we're going to bring them and place them with these foster families. It's a joke. We can't. We've got a crisis. Then let's go a step further and give you a stat, okay? We have 1,200 beds, licensed beds. This is with trauma-informed therapeutic programs, because you don't rescue a child from trafficking and then send them home and say, hey, you're safe, go back to school, go play basketball. It doesn't work that way. This is Ilonka on your show. I'm sure she spoke to you of decades of therapy and rehabilitation that goes in. If you can keep the child alive, most of the children that die, their lifespan is 7 years, they die after rescue. Not even while being trafficked. They die in the first 30 days after they're saved, after they're rescued, because their world is falling apart. What they thought loved was the community, the family that the pimp convinced them they were contributing to is now ripped from them. They've got nothing. They've got sexually transmitted diseases, maybe have had forced abortions. There's so many things in that child's mind. No adult can handle this. I mean, people struggle just to handle a marriage with one person. Never mind sexual abuse over and over and over. And so the numbers are staggering. There's 1,200 beds in our country. That's it.
Wow.
You put 2 hotels together in Dallas, Texas, and you got more than 1,200. There's 1,200 beds in the country. Of the 1,200 beds, only 300 of them are for minors. So I'm telling you, the 75,000 kids trafficked, right? That body of people in Texas 500,000 in the US per day, and we've got 300 beds for minors, 300 beds in licensed safe houses where they can actually go get help. And then people go, save the children, rescue the children. Of course, yes, we want to rescue every child. Where do you take them?
Right.
Now let's have a conversation about State Department and the federal government. And
we're going to get back to the government. That's on the list.
Yeah.
But I want to touch on something really quickly, because you touched on, you highlighted how bad it is inside the borders, regardless of immigration. And you touched on the border a little bit, but can you talk a little bit about how what happens on the border? I know we politicize stuff too much, but just the realities.
No, this is not a political issue.
Yeah, the realities of how the things we're doing as a government on the border are making it easier for these criminals to do what they're doing.
Yeah, so about 7 years ago, that's really when the pivot happened, around 2014. And this is fact. Every single drug cartel in Mexico, it started with MS-13. They basically almost could have shared a manifesto and said, we are now going to actively pursue trafficking kids, right? There was an absolute moment when they said, now we're going to engage. Now, there's been sexual exploitation and abduction in Mexico City forever, but it was normally for ransom. It was more normally to influence a political figure or a wealthy individual, right? There was a proactive decision around 2014 by the cartel saying, no, we will traffic kids and drugs simultaneously because children produce more money. You can sell the child over and over and over. You sell the pound of cocaine once. A dog can sniff the cocaine. They can detect it. You can detect sexual trauma. It walks in plain sight. Some women go 30 years before talking about a single rape. So the cartel said, we're all in. We're in trafficking children. Now, understand Mexico. The catastrophe Mexico is, from human rights and human rights violations. Then put sex trafficking of children on top of it, right? And then open the U.S. border. Let's have that conversation. Now you open the U.S. border, where a lot of the trafficking in the U.S. is also run within the prison system in the United States. The trafficking is controlled by the gangs, the organized trafficking sector, politicians, the gangs, south of the border, in the U.S. and inside the prison system. There is so much money involved here.
Coming up, more with Jaco Booyens, founder of Share Together. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
The Charles Love Show continues on AM 560, The Answer. Here's Charles Love.
Welcome back. I am continuing my conversation with Jaco Booyens, founder of Share Together, an anti-trafficking nonprofit. Here he continues with the travesty at the border, and I ask him to give us an idea of who people are that are actually creating the demand for these terrible services.
I hardly ever say this because I don't want people to think, well, this is a job, this is a career path. But one child would produce $250,000 a year tax-free for a pimp, one child. So that individual traffics 4 children. He makes $1 million cash, tax-free. Now you got a real problem.
Talk about how that number is almost as big as drugs now.
We are just a hair behind drugs. So $32.5 billion annually spent on sexually exploiting children in the United States. To put it in perspective, if you want to know how big the problem is, let's talk money. Now you open a border. Who thought of that idea? You open a border and you think the cartels are going to go, you know what? We're going to take care of children. They're not a commodity. We're not going to sell them into your country. Are we absolutely insane? We've got 25,000 minors today, as we're speaking, that's in holding at our border or in transition at our border from Guatemala, Honduras, Cuba, Venezuela, Mexico. So for that to happen, I want people to understand the president of Mexico says that this is okay because he allows it. You can bring kids from Honduras and you can sell your child to the cartel, and you can take a Honduran child who's not a Mexican child, and you can walk him through my country unopposed with a free pass into the United States.
No question.
So before we even get to the U.S. border or Vice President Harris or President Biden, what about the president of Mexico? What are you doing to protect your children? Where's the United States holding you accountable to say, hey, you need to protect your children? What is the Honduran president doing? Before we get to the border, everybody want to get border. They're coming through other countries where that leadership is responsible for their children, right? No, forget about that. It's just all the conservatives in America and all the Christians are crazy for wanting children to be protected in their own countries. It's insanity to think that you can bring the world's children here and that we need to handle all of that. Because here's what's going to happen. I told you before, there's nowhere to put them. When you hear a president of the United States saying, we promise and guarantee that every child that's coming across the border, we're going to place with a safe family, it is a bold-faced lie. It's not possible.
I hate to cut you off, but there's so much we can talk about. We only got about 8 or so minutes. You talk about all the money that's out there, but in order for it to be financially beneficial to these cartels and pimps, somebody has to be willing to spend the money. So let's break down that myth of who these buyers are.
When we talk $35 billion, you go, well, surely that doesn't just come from the lower income class. Surely that doesn't just come from, the gangs. Sure, no, it comes from everybody in America. All the following job descriptions we've been involved with at times for apprehending and arresting: the janitor, the plumber, the electrician, the school principal, the sitting acting U.S. state senator, the congressman, the police chief, the police officer, the neighbor next door, the Fortune 500 money manager, the Wall Street individual, right? This is everybody. The only difference between the janitor buying sex from a child and Jeffrey Epstein is Epstein had more disposable income, so he literally paid to abuse children every 2 hours of the day. The janitor maybe doesn't have that network, can maybe do it once a week, once a month. But the way that it's done is the same. This is not, this is the evil billionaire empire in Hollywood and in the day. It's the same. The way they traffic, what they do to this is violent sexual crimes. I don't want people, this is not romance. And by the way, it's children, non-consensual. So now you have states like California writing laws trying to make it consensual at age 14, writing laws that says, well, a judge should decide whether she wanted it or not. No, 17 and under, she's a victim. We have statutory rape in this country. We've got states right now writing laws against statutory rape. We've got states doing this. So who's doing this? It's America doing it. It's everybody. It's fathers doing this to their own children, selling their own children. Cases we work where the dad is selling his own daughters to the principal, to the neighbor, network sells. It's in the Catholic Church. It's in every church. To have that amount of money spent, there's a lot of takers, and demand fuels supply. Supply meets demand. That's business 101, not the other way around. Because there is demand to have sex with children in this country, there will always be some evil, twisted individual that will supply that demand. And unless we get into the bottom of demand and tackle demand in this country, which starts with pornography, 100%. Any individual that's listening right now shakes their head and goes, porn has nothing to do with sexually exploiting children. You flat out don't know what you're talking about, okay? You are feeding a beast and a dragon that lives by exploiting human beings for sex. You're feeding the beast. And it's a drug, the most addictive drug on earth. And that drug wants more and more. So you start with soft porn and you end up one day buying sex from an adult. And then you got to go younger, because that drug is a drug that wants younger. And they end up, there's not a single pedophile that's not a porn addict. There's also not been a single mass murderer in America, whether it's Bundy or any of them, not one of them, that was not also a porn addict. Porn destroys the mind. It focuses the individual on sexual satisfaction only, and they start living their lives to get sexually satisfied, and it's got to go younger and younger and younger. And so if we want to talk demand, that's how you knock the teeth out of this thing.
Coming up, my final segment with Jaco Booyens, founder of Share Together and president of After Eaten Pictures. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
You like me and I like you.
The Charles Love Show continues on AM 560, The Answer. Here's Charles Love.
Welcome back. We have reached our final segment with Jaco Booyens, founder of Share Together. In our final segment, he tells an amazing story about an unexpected rescue that will just blow your mind. And he tells us what we can do to help the fight against trafficking.
So our location fell through. We were supposed to shoot a motel. The motel owner called and said, I don't want to do this. This is bad publicity. I don't want to say that there was an anti-trafficking film shot at my motel. Later on, we learned why, because trafficking was happening at that motel. So we moved to a different motel, Homeland Security, ICE, which is absolutely vital, by the way, okay? You hear people go, abolish ICE, Homeland Security, CBP. There's no way we protect America's children against trafficking without ICE. We didn't want actors in this movie playing those parts. We actually got real operatives. So they were in the movie, and we were shooting a scene to rescue a child in the movie based on a true story. And while standing at the door, they got a call that a girl they'd been looking for 16 months was at a motel. So what had happened was, while we were filming that film, 2 doors down, they moved from our door 2 doors down, broke through a door and rescued a child on a live movie set while reenacting that on a movie set. And I would say that's the grace of God, because remember, we were not supposed to be at that hotel. We were supposed to be at a different hotel. So yeah, that happened, but that's how real it is. I mean, we were there for a day and a half working to prepare for that shoot, and a child was being trafficked 2 doors down. So what can people do?
Yeah, that's where I want to go. Solutions. Yeah. What can we do?
They can go to our website and educate themselves on what trafficking looks like, how to spot a child in a 7-Eleven or a truck stop or somewhere that may be under duress. What do I say to that child? And then they can connect with us and become a volunteer at sharetogethernnow.org. They can watch the movie 8 days, sit down, all their children 13 and up, and watch that film 8 days. It's on Netflix, it's on Prime. You can, if you buy it from us directly, then all the proceeds go to fight trafficking. And then get in contact with us to see how they can allow us to help them in their community. This is a situation where people have to take their own communities back. Get on the school boards. Ask your school principal if they're teaching about child sexual exploitation, the dangers of online activity. Talk to your pastor, your youth pastor. Get this conversation started in the community and raise the awareness of the children so that the children's risk profile is higher. So when a predator looks at a child, he goes, that child is going to blow my cover. I'm not going to be able to traffic that child, right? And that's what we need to do on the front end. On the back end, lobby, vote for the right people. We need more safe houses. Ask these questions of your politicians. Hey, why do we not have a safe house in our state? Why do we have nowhere to take a child that's rescued? You know, why is that? Why is this not a priority? Why do we not hear this conversation on a single presidential debate? Ever. Never. Oh, they'll throw human trafficking, the term, out when they talk about the border because it's political rhetoric. Now, let's get specific. Let's go talk about child rape in your city. Let's talk about rape on campus. Let's talk about the numbers being skewed and not wanting to know what's really going on. Mayors silencing these things, district attorneys silencing these things, judges not taking it to court, but doing plea bargain deals. So when a predator that exploits a child gets a misdemeanor, he gets a drug charge or, aggravated, some sort of an assault charge, not an anti-trafficking charge where he gets 30 years in prison, right? These are the questions we really have to ask. So people can connect with us online, sharetogethernnow.org. They can also help us, support us financially, donate, because the proceeds go towards fighting these battles like comprehensive sex ed in the school system, that's grooming the children in the school system, et cetera, et cetera. So, Charles, thank you.
Thank you. He is Jaco Booyens, president and CEO of After Eden Pictures and the founder of Share Together, nonprofit organization fighting against the global crisis of sex trafficking. Jaco, thank you very much for your time. It's been informative, and I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Charles. Thank you.